When did we pause long enough to notice the way time moves beneath us, quietly, without permission? Not the clock ticking on the wall, not the calendar pages fluttering, but the subtle current of our days, in our days that slip past before we even recognize them. We feel it, don't we? The stretch between one thought and the next, the moment that escape where we search for meaning elsewhere. In this video, as we watch the deep meaning pictures, I'll share with you deep meaning words. Let's walk together. We watch ourselves in habits, in routine, in the small repetitions, and we wonder why life still feels so strange. This study theme here, a past we can't quite catch, a past that carries us along whether we consent or not. Time is patient, relentless, and for that reason, very reason, it is also a teacher. Every day unfolds as a journey of discovery, revealing the shapes of our fears, the shadow of our desires, the quiet cracks that where truth seeps through. We may try to grasp it, hold it, label it, but it moves. And in that movement, we are reminded that only moment truly ours is this one, right vibrating under our skin, unnoticed until we pay attention. We know the sensation, the strange mix of familiarity and strangeness in a life that feels known yet somehow unfamiliar. We resist, even as we learn, we lean forward, hesitant, wanting certainty, wanting control, and still the day moves, still we move. And somewhere in the overlap of movement and observation, we catch a hint of what it means to live intentionally, to notice the current that carry us forward, to recognize that being present is not passive act but quite constant negotiation with time itself. You have felt it, haven't you? That tightness in your chest when the path ahead isn't clear. That restless charm of your mind when choices stretch beyond what feels safe, beyond what has answers printed neatly on a page. You stand at the edge of something unknown, the air heavy with possibility and fear, and every instinct urges you to retreat, to grasp what's familiar. You tell yourself you will wait, that the moment will clarify itself, but deep down, you know waiting changes nothing. There's a strange tension in this. The uncertainty you resist is not a void, it is a field, fertile if you let it breathe. Potential doesn't announce itself, it waits quietly, leaning into the corners of discomfort. When you take a step toward what you cannot yet name, the ground may tremble beneath you, and yet each trauma is shaping something inside. Each hesitation, each misstep becomes a teacher in disguise. The unknown is a classroom for the brave, not because it spares them fear, but because it invites them to notice what fear has been keeping hidden. Remember the last time you tried something uncomfortable, something that made your hand shake or your voice falter. Perhaps you wrote a paragraph that felt wrong, sent a message that might be misunderstood, or raised a hand in a room that seemed too crowded with judgment. You failed. Or, at least, that's what it felt like at the time. But when you look back now, in fragments, you see that each misstep was a quiet carving into a shape of who you are becoming. Every step into the unfamiliar shapes who we become. Imagine your life as a river. Its surface can seem calm, predictable, but beneath, current swell, turning, splitting, merging with the unseen streams. Sometimes the river pushes you into the rocks, sometimes into eddies that trap you in circles. Sometimes it carries you forward faster than you thought possible. You cannot control the river, but you can notice its channels. You can lean into its flow, and in the bending, in the drift, you begin to discover a resilience you don't know was waiting. It is in this noticing, the simple act of observing without judgment, that transformation begins. You don't have to leap immediately, but you can practice the motion of leaning forward. You can journal the trauma in your chest. You can the quiet weight of hesitation, and trace it back to what you want to understand, not the outcome, but yourself. Each time you comfort uncertainty, you are making small deposit in a currency that will one day buy insight, courage, and perspective. Perhaps you have resisted before. Perhaps you have stepped back when the current seems too strong. That's natural. You are learning in real time that change is not a threat. It is an invitation to evolve. The river does not wait for your consent. It goes, bends, it carries, it reshapes. And so do you when you lean into it. Leaning is not reckless, it is participation. Learning is acknowledgement. Learning is learning without guarantee of landing softly, yet discovering that even the hardest edges can teach. You might notice the fear still whispers, the tightness still exists. That is proof, not failure. Proof that the moment matters, that the passage you are in is real, that the unknown you resist is in fact a classroom, and that every choice to step, however small, ripples through who you are becoming. There's no separate timeline where this learning happens. It is here, in this moment, in the act of noticing, in the act of daring to move even when the river seems endless. So you breathe, you lean, you scribble in journals you might never read again. You try something you cannot fully name, and in the drifting, in the failing, in the trembling heartbeat, you begin to see. Each choice, each tentative step is quietly shaping you into someone capable of meeting what has always been coming. Someone who learns from the water, from the turbulence, from the current that carry us forward, whether we ask or not. We tend to chase clarity, don't we? We reach for certainty as if it were a key, a door that, once opened, would finally explain everything. And yet life waits for us in fragments, in the quiet edges between decisions, in the margins of failing, in the spaces we are too afraid to notice. We stumble, we pause, we wonder if we are doing it right, and still, we step forward. In this tension between what we imagine and what actually unfolds, we tell ourselves that self-discovery is about finding something hidden, a piece of ourselves tucked away in some secret room. But we realize through that We don't find ourselves, we create ourselves. Every choice, every hesitation, every small act of courage or avoidance is shaping the person we will become. Change is not a gift to receive, it is a material we work with. You cannot discover yourself in a single day. You build yourself day by day, step by step, in the quiet labor of being present. Think back to the last time you tried something and it didn't work. Perhaps you volunteered for a task that felt beyond your skill, only to retreat when it became difficult. Perhaps you spoke up and you are misunderstood, or waited too long to act and watch opportunity pass. We have all kept journals, scribbled notes to ourselves, paused mid-thought and asked, why did I hesitate? Why did I fail? They are not failures in isolation, they are experiments. Tiny laboratories where we test the limits of our courage, curiosity, and patience. We notice patterns in those experiments if we allow ourselves. The discomfort, the mistakes, the awkward pauses, they are not indicators of weakness. They are the heavy tools of evolution. Each journal entry, each moment of reflection is currency. Learning is the currency of personal evolution. And unlike money, it cannot be spent carelessly. It must be earned through attention, through trial, through the willingness to move even when the clarity is absent. Self-improvement is often framed as destination. We imagine a point where our work is complete, a version of ourselves fully realized, perfected, and free for struggle. We chase that mileage, and we fail to notice the steady, quiet work that occurs in between. The shape purpose not in the drive but in ongoing rhythm of decision, hesitation, reflection. It happens when we confront discomfort, admit confusion, and yet still lean into the unknown. The journey is itself the site of growth, the laboratory of who we are becoming. We stumble across small decisions that felt disappointingly heavy. Choosing honesty when it could cost connection. Speaking up when the silence would be safer. Letting the that might be judged before we even understand that. And then looking back later, months over years, and realize the shape those decisions gave us, the shape we couldn't see at the time. We were not lost. We were building. We were experimenting. We noticed that the process is not linear. Progress hides in loops. In moments we overlook, we stumble, we pause, we wonder, we fail, and then slowly we rise again. We recognize the hidden thread connecting attempt and errors, doubts and small triumphs. In this, there's a quiet affirmation. We are not incomplete, not broken. We are engaged in creation, the ongoing, agramorous, intricate craft of becoming ourselves. And so we continue, not because we are perfect, not because we know exactly where we are going, but because we have learned that each moment, each failure, each hesitant step carries its own lessons. We notice the subtle shift in perception, the changes in how we respond, the quiet courage that accumulates over time. We cannot rush this. There's no shortcut, but there's movement, and movement is enough. Movement is everything. You know that moment, don't you? The one when everything inside resists, when the mind jumps with reasons to stay where it is, to retreat into what is safe, what is unknown, what is known. You want certainty, but certainty has already left the room. You feel the tension in your chest, the tight knot of fear. The mind whispering that you are not ready, that you might fail, and it's too much. And yet, somewhere beneath the resistance, something asks quietly, instantly, what if moving, even imperfectly, is the only way forward? There's a change in that whisper, not the flashy, obvious kind, but the subtle, trembling kind that emerges when you allow yourself to be wrong. The willingness to be wrong is the seed of wisdom. You don't have to leap into mastery, only need to step into possibility, knowing you might falter, you might stumble, you might fail spectacularly, and yet every misstep carries its own lesson. Think of the time you have tried to change, only to recoil. You started a project, a habit, a conversation, and paused midway. You waited for the ground to feel solid, for certainty to appear, and when it didn't, you retreated. You catalog those citations in your mind. Not now, maybe later. What if it's wrong? Yet when you revisit those moments, months later, you notice something strange. Even in hesitation, even in retreat, something has shifted inside you. The mind you were resisting is now a little stronger, a little more aware, a little more capable. Change does not ask for permission, it demands courage. And sometimes, courage is simply showing up for yourself again. Do you remember the first time you faced a decision that felt impossible? Perhaps it was speaking a truth, admitting a mistake, or choosing an unfamiliar path. One honest decision, the kind that shakes you and makes your chest tighten, can be the hinge of transformation. Transformation starts with one honest decision. You don't have to reinvent your entire life overnight. You only need to honor the choice in front of you. One step, one word, one acknowledgement can shift the entire shape of what comes next. I recall my own attempt to forge change, sitting at a desk with a pen in hand, trying to write thoughts that felt raw, unshaped, imperfect. Each sentence stumbled over the next. Each paragraph revealed more hesitation than clarity. I wanted the words to arrive reformed, polished, perfect. But what arrived was not perfection, it was insight. The act of writing, even badly, illuminated patterns I hadn't seen. I realized that the clarity I sought never existed outside of an action. It existed in movement, in practice, in the courage to be raw. Transformation often resembles forging steel, raw, brittle, uncertain, heated, hammered, bent into shape through friction. All like seasons changing, slow, unnoticed at first, Subtle shift in light and shadow, until suddenly everything feels different and you wonder when the change happened. Or the clearing of fog, when the world has always been there, but your vision has been blurred, and gradually the mist lifts enough to see what is there. You realize that the discomfort, the hesitation, the resistance, they are not barriers, they are part of the process, they are shaping forces. You notice, don't you, how the mind clings to the illusion of safety? You rehearse scenarios, imagine failure, weigh risk endless, and convince yourself that waiting still will protect you. But waiting changes nothing. Action, even small, trembling action, is the only teacher that matters. Each time you confront the tightness in your chest, each time you step despite fear, the shape of your courage grows. You see things more clearly, and you understand patterns more subtly. You gain the wisdom that no amount of planning could provide. There are moments you will falter, will doubt. You look back and see opportunities that seemed missed, choices that felt too heavy, steps that felt misaligned. And yet, within those moments lies transformation. You cannot avoid the friction and still be forged. You cannot sidestep the fog and still find clarity. Each pause, each failure, each moment of discomfort contributes to the slow, steady shaping of who you are becoming. Listen to your own rhythm. Notice the subtle heartbeat of hesitation and courage. Allow yourself to repeat softly the truth. We stumble, we will falter, and still we step forward. That stepping is the act of becoming. That stepping is the classroom. That stepping is the forging, the seasonal shift, the clearing of the fog. And in this, you begin to see that transformation is never a sudden explosion. It is the quiet accumulation of decision, repeated, noticed, reflected upon. One honest decision leads to another, each carrying a little more clarity, a little more courage, a little more self-understanding. You may not feel it in the moment. You may resist, dissent, or fear it. But over time, the cumulative forces of those decisions reveal itself, and you find that you are no longer the same person who hesitated at the edge of the unknown. You are stronger, wiser, more awake. And still, the river moves, and still, you lean forward, and still, you discover that act of stepping, trembling, as it may be, it is itself the teacher you have been waiting for. We grow in the cracks we try to avoid. That discomfort we push away. The acknowledge poses the moment we want to flee. Those are the very places where life teaches us, where creation quietly begins. We notice too late sometimes, only when the edges of memory sharpen into clarity, only when we realize that the moments we resisted carried the seed of change. We stumble, we question, we doubt, we learn. Each station, each misstep, each uncomfortable conversation, each choice to step forward despite fear, they leave a trace. And looking back, we see that what felt pointless at the time was shaping us in ways we could not have foreseen. Uncertainty is the soil where new ideas grow. the time we did not understand ourselves, the time we felt lost and misaligned. Those were fertile moments. We planted nothing consciously, yet the soil was rich, and slowly, quietly, transformation took root. We notice how strength accumulates, not in comfort, but in discomfort. Every leap into what terrifies us leaves a mark, a subtle enforcement of courage, a quiet wandering of capacity. You may have resisted before, retreated before, doubted before, and yet, in every act of engagement with the unknown, no matter how small, you grow stronger. Each awkward, trembling step forward was a practice in resilience, an invisible training of your mind and heart. You did not know it at the time. You only knew it, the tension, the hesitation, the fear. But looking back, you see the pattern. Growth emerged, not in ease, but in confrontation. We carry forward lessons that were invisible at the moment. Opportunities that seemed dangerous, paths that seemed uncertain, moments we waited to skip. All were shaping us for what was to come. The future belongs to adaptable. Not the fastest, not the cleverest, not the most certain, but the ones willing to bend, to change, to learn, to step into discomfort again and again. We remember regrets too. We remember wishing we had done more, said more, leaned further. And yet, even in regret, there's recognition that every step we did take, every act of hesitation, every fragment of insight has formed a foundation of who we are now. We notice how fear and an opportunity exist side by side. We notice how the cracks, the uncomfortable pauses, the moment that made us question ourselves were the very places where insight began to gather. We stumble, we question, we doubt, we learn. Patterns repeat. We recognize that rhythm. Growth is not linear. Strength is not obvious in the moment. But over time, we notice the subtle accumulation of courage, the shaping of perspective, the quiet emergence of wisdom, the discomfort we resisted, the unknown we feared, the leaps we postponed. There are threads of the tapestry of what we'll have become. We are part of something larger, a process, a flow, a movement that neither waits for our concert nor our perfection. The river carries us, and we learn to bend with it. We learn to recognize that the tension, the fear, the uncertainty, those are not signs of inadequacy. They are the ground from which something new arises. And in that recognition, pressure dissolves, shame dissolves. What remains is the quiet understanding that struggle is not the obstacle. It is the vehicle, it is the soil, the forge, the shape of force becoming. You notice it, don't you? The way challenges press against your chest, not as punishment, but as invitations. Every challenge carries its own hidden opportunity for self-discovery, though we rarely see it in the moment. You stumble every problem at work, a conversation with a friend, a decision that seems impossible. Your heart tightens, your mind spins, and yet, if you linger into the tension, just long enough to observe yourself, something shift. Think of who you were yesterday. That version of yourself carried fear, habits, doubts, patterns that once felt permanent. But you aren't bound to that version. Who you were yesterday isn't who you have to be today. You can rise above yourself, not through force, but through small, deliberate experiment. Changing a habit, taking a risk, writing a road through in a journal you may never did aloud. Those are the steps of personal evolution. They are the subtle teaser shaping a life that until now has mostly been unconscious. You try things you are unsure of. You wake earlier, attempt conversation you have avoided, sketch ideas that feel foolish. Each choice seems small, almost insignificant, but the accumulation of those experiments leaves traces you cannot erase. Slowly, you notice your perception shifting. You notice the way your mind tightens less when uncertainty arrives. You notice your reaction bending, expanding, learning. To learn is to rise above who you are, and to rise is gradual, almost impossible, and almost impossible, until one day you pause and realize the steps you once feared now feel navigatable. Imagine walking through a house you thought you knew. You open a door you never noticed before, and a new room stretches before you. The walls are familiar, yet different. The furniture, your habits, your routines, the object of your mind, they feel altered. You had walked those halls for years, thinking you understand every corner, and suddenly, in the quiet moment, you see possibility where there was only routine. That is the effect of taking small steps, of experimenting with yourself, of leaning into challenges. Or imagine sculpting a statue. You chip away, unsure if the form is right. Some pieces fall away unexpectedly. You cause the unevenness, the chips that break too far, the roughness that remains, and yet in the persistence of your hands, a figure emerges. You don't control the outcome entirely, but you guide it. You learn through the discerning, through the mistake, through the willingness to be wrong. Your own hands are your teacher. Your own effort is the proof. Or climbing a path you cannot see fully. The fog cars around your feet. The incline stretches above, uncertain. You step, feet potholes. Adjust, one foot forward, one hand forward. Your body is trembling, step by step. You rise higher. Looking down, you see the distance you have traveled, the ground that seemed impassable. You remember the fear you carried, and you notice something extraordinary. You are capable of more than you realized. You are stronger in your presence than you were in your hesitation. You record those observations, sometimes in journals, sometimes in mental notes. You capture the friction between fear and possibility, the subtle shift in your response to the unknown. You notice the cumulative force of those decisions, the quiet evolution that occurs when you allow yourself to experiment, to risk, to fail, to reflect. And in this noticing, you come to understand that growth is not dramatic. It is the accumulation of small moments, the layering of insight, the silent crafting of your own character. And you see that your challenges are not punishments, they are mirrors. They reflect what you have been avoiding, what you have been resisting, what you haven't yet realized about your own capacity. Every hesitation is an opportunity. Every misstep is an invitation. And in the act of observing yourself, of learning into discomfort, of noticing subtle growth, you participate in a slow, deliberate ascent. Step by step, experiment by experiment, reflection by reflection, you begin to rise. You rise above the patterns of yesterday. You rise above the limitation you imagine permanent. You rise into the small, undeniable power of noticing, of doing, of being present. You realize that the person you are becoming is shaped not by dramatic moments, but by the quiet accumulation of insight, by the courage to face the unseen, and by the willingness to sculpt yourself from the raw material of experience. We all carry the weight of choices, the echoes of past failures, the smooths that trigger like shadows in the edge of our minds. We have stumbled, paused, doubted, and yet moved forward again. We know what it is to wrestle with uncertainty, to wrestle with fear of being wrong, and to feel the quiet pressure of decision that shapes not only the day but the contours of who we are becoming. We notice in the rhythm of our own thoughts, in the moments of hesitation we hesitate, in the way the past triggers even as we step into the present. We notice how discomfort has accompanied every meaningful step we have taken, how tension, uncertainty, and resistance were really signs of failure but markers of growth. Progress is the chart of discomfort. Every small act of engagement, every step into what feels uncertain or heavy, leaves an invisible imprint. It accumulates quietly, like water carving stone, like a sculptor chipping away at rough marble. And we realize that the person we are becoming, the version of ourselves, capable of more, of seeing more, of feeling more, needs today's struggle. Without it, shaping cannot occur. Without it, the accumulation of insight, courage, and subtle strength would remain incomplete. We can look back and notice patterns, the choices we avoided, the conversation we deferred, the moment of hesitation that, in this retrospect, shaped us as profoundly as our successes. We noted the small decision that first inside at the time, but viewed it as larger arc, carried meaning. We see the quiet laboratory of our lives, trials, errors, reflections, repeated enough to transform the unseen corners of our minds. There's no external validation here, no dramatic announcement. The change is subtle, internal, cumulative. And now, you can notice it too. Notice the tension in your chest, the restless thought that accompanying decision yet to be made. Notice the small action that already ripples through your present life. A word spoken, a message sent, a habit shifted, a page written in a private journal. Each is a step into the shaping of who you are becoming. Each is a trace of courage, a trace of engagement, a trace of growth. Those are the small markers of evolution that occur quietly, but they are no less significant for their subtlety. You imagine the next choice, the next decision, the next attempt at something you have been postponing. You lean forward, not with certainty, not with grand gestures, but with the material from which you build yourself. the person you are becoming depends on this accumulation. You don't need to leap, you only need to step. You don't need to know the entire path. You only need to notice the next stone under your foot. And if something feels familiar, if your chest tightens at the thought of stepping into uncertainty, you already know what matters. You already know that discomfort is not an enemy. That hesitation carries insight, and that small act, repeated and observed, shape the contours of your evolution. You already know that the present is yours to inhabit fully, that the past is a teacher, and that the accumulation of the small, honest decision is the quiet force behind transformation. You step, you notice, you reflect, you learn, you lean into tension, you experiment again. You write, speak, act, and pause to observe. Each choice is the quiet evolution. Each action, however small, carries its own imprint. And over time, you see the shaping occur. You see the person you are becoming emerging from the edges of the discomfort, forged by moments. You lean forward rather than retreated, built by the quiet practice of noticing and stepping over and over. You do not need external approval. You do not need dramatic validation. You only need to attend to yourself, to notice, to act, to allow the shaping to continue. The river flows, the fog lifts, the scarp emerges, the path stretches out onward. And in this quiet, persistent engagement with your own life, you discover that evolution was never a distant goal. It was always happening here, now, through the choices we are willing to make.